Well, you know, you know how it is. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, boys and girls. How are we all doing today? Yeah, well, sometimes you just gotta start a broadcast with some coughing, right? Anyway, we are on the precipice. Not really. No. No, but what we're doing today is we're going to continue our selected readings from selected readings. I'm just gonna read it start to finish because it's so short. We're going to read Lombard Street, continue reading Lombard Street, and last time we actually ended on a rather topical. Ended in a rather topical place. We ended, or rather, we're starting this time with the nature of the formation of the Bank of England, right? And that's fantastic because for the past few days I have been trying to explain to our year one, some of our year two and three viewers, students, what really the purpose of a central bank is. And I think this will simply not but supplement that conversation. Actually, quite concretely, right? Well, okay, so it's not how do I say? Hello? Oh, it's not. I don't think it's actually bad to do this, in part because it's really necessary. So, especially in our current age, where like for the past 20, even 30 years, I would say, ever since our boy, ever since Greenspan, I think the central bank has been fairly sitting in the background to such an extent that most people don't really consider it in their day-to-day lives. But given that inflation is now once again a topic that everybody in society wants to have an opinion on, it I think is good for us to sort of understand why central banks exist. Does that make sense? Excellent. Will this kill my throat? If it does, I mean, it's not okay. It's not like these broadcasts are any worse than any half-hour meeting that I have to begin with, right? So, unfortunately, yeah, no, I don't think it'll do much. No, don't worry, it's chronic. Lung issue is chronic. Don't worry. Well, don't I say don't worry, but whatever. So we are going to start now. Well, at 4 minutes. Um, I will probably stop whenever I want to talk instead of trying to stop at predetermined locations, right? But it's fine. You can think of this as as an unofficial bedtime story segment. How about that? You're too kind. It has gotten a little bit worse. We might need to talk about it sometime in the near future, but we'll see. Okay. The monarchical form of Lombard Street is due also to the note issue. The origin of the Bank of England has been told by Macaulay, and it is never wise for an ordinary writer to tell again what he has told so much better. Nor is it necessary for his right. Why my accent changed? Why did my accent? Right? Why did my accent change? I'm so confused. Anyway, not important. Nor is it necessary, for his writings are in everyone's hands. Still, I must remind my readers of the curious story. Of all institutions in the world, the Bank of England is now probably the most remote from party politics and from financing. But in its origin, it was not only a finance company, but a Whig finance company. Keep in mind that the Whigs were the original quasi-left-wing party, right? Like they were the progressives. It was founded by a Whig government because it was in desperate want of money, and supported by the city because the city was Whig. The city in this case, obviously, in any British writing, the city always refers to London because London is the city, right? Well, actually Westminster, but it doesn't matter. Very briefly, the story was this. The government of Charles II, under the Cabal Ministry, had brought the credit of the English state to the lowest possible point. It had perpetrated one of those monstrous frauds which are likewise gross blunders. The goldsmiths, who then carried on upon a trifling scale what we should now call banking, used to deposit their reserves of treasure in the exchequer, with the sanction and under the care of the government. In many European countries, the credit of the state had been so much better than any other credit that it had been used to strengthen the beginnings of banking. The credit of the state had been so used in England, though there had lately been a civil war and several revolutions, but honesty of the English government was trusted implicitly. But Charles II showed that it was trusted undeservedly. He shut up the exchequer, would pay no more, and so the goldsmiths were ruined. The credit of the Stuart government never recovered from this monstrous robbery, and the government created by the Revolution of 1688 could hardly expect to be more trusted with money than its predecessor. A government created by a revolution hardly ever is. There is a taint of violence which capitalists dread instinctively, and there is always a rational apprehension that the government, which one revolution thought fit to set up, another revolution may think fit to pull down. We should stop here, actually talk about this real quick. Discussion points. Excuse me. 7 minutes. Capitalist. How did Betty put it? Blah, 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 blah. Dread instinctively. Dread. Oh, can't spell. Dread instinctively. The threat of violence? I can't remember anything. Taint of violence. Because that is uncertainty. And I think even a casual explanation of this will make sense, right? Like when times are tough, it is hard to invest because you don't know what your money will do, and so people will keep their money. In times of unrest, it is hard to invest. I like that, it rhymes. Turn it into a limerick. No, in times of unrest, it is hard to invest any money because it is hard to predict or hard to give an accurate prediction of the future, right? And that is, I think that is fair, because unrest tends to be unrestful, tend to leave, tend to actually open the door for many opportunities, which is also why times of unrest can also make great fortunes, but mostly it destroys fortune, as we can see. I don't actually need to cough, but I'm just typing cough crypto cough, right? And so our boy, who is, I can't remember, first name, and I really don't care to look it up. Our boy, who's considered to be the JP Morgan of the crypto world, is now buying up tons of distressed assets that are actually probably just fine. But because of liquidity issues, they have had to sell, and he was there, and he had the money, and so he bought it. And that is, that is how people make great fortunes in times of distress. But it's also how people completely, like, we tend to forget those who have failed and only remember those who are successful. We tend to forget those who have failed and only remember those who are successful, right? So that's why capitalists really dread violence, because violence is the ultimate form of unrest, right? Anyway, in 1694, the credit of William III's government was so low in London that it was impossible for it to borrow any large sum, and the evil was the greater because, in consequence of the French War, the financial straits of the government were extreme. At last, a scheme was hit upon which would relieve their necessities. The plans, says Macaulay, was that £1,200 should be raised at what was then considered as the moderate rate of 8%. Can you imagine 8% being a moderate rate? Oh my god. I do, yeah. 11. Imagine 8% to be considered a moderate. In order to induce the subscribers to advance the money promptly on terms so unfavorable to the public, the subscribers were to be incorporated by the name of the Governor and Company of the Bank of England. They were essentially they were bribed, right? Like these people were bribed. They were so incorporated, and the what? 1,200,000 pounds. What? 1,200,000 pounds. Okay. 1,200,000 pounds was obtained. On many succeeding occasions, their credit was of essential use to the government. Without their aid, our national debt could not have been borrowed, and if we had not been able to raise that money, we should have been conquered by France and compelled to take back James II. Can you imagine that? And for many years afterwards, the existence of that debt was a main reason why the industrial classes never would think of recalling the pretender or of upsetting the revolution settlement. The fund holder is always considered in the books of that time as opposed to his legitimate sovereign, because it was to be feared that the sovereign would repudiate the debt which was raised by those who dethroned him, and which was spent in resisting him and his allies. For a long time, the Bank of England was the focus of London liberalism, and in that capacity rendered to the state inestimable services. In return for these substantial benefits, the Bank of England received from the government, either at first or afterwards, 3 most important privileges. Let's think about that for a moment, right? Like, just before we continue, the bank was set up as a revolutionary bank to fund the continued revolution against, what was it, James III, right? James III? Second? James II. James II. Oh my god, I can't remember my English kings. So essentially, it was exactly as Badger said, right? If the king managed to reconquer England, these debts might have been cancelled. So the funders of the bank were staunchly against the return of James II, especially because he might have cancelled those debts. Now, it would have been interesting, right? An interesting counterfactual if James II had committed to those debts. Then it would have robbed the revolution of its financial backers. Right, because if you think of if you think about it this way, um, if James would cancel those debts, then then all of those early investments would have been gone. So people would fund it more to protect their early investments. There we go. Right. Anyway, three most important privileges. First, the Bank of England had the exclusive possession of the government balances. In its first period, as I have shown, the bank gave credit to the government, but afterwards it derived credit from the government. There is a natural tendency in men to follow the example of the government under which they live. The government is the largest, most important, and most conspicuous entity with which the mass of any people are acquainted. Its range of knowledge must always be infinitely greater than the average of their knowledge, and therefore, unless there is a conspicuous warning to the contrary, most men are inclined to think their government right, and, when they can, to do what it does. We will talk about this another time. How about that? Let me make a note of this. I'll just write this down. Bagehot 51. Oh, actually Lombard 51. Last. In fact, you can ask me about it in our next quasi philosophical discussions. How about that? Yeah. But if the government is right in trusting the Bank of England with the great balance of the nation, it cannot be wrong in trusting it with my little balance. Secondly, the Bank of actually let's just talk about this real quick. 17 minutes. Bank of England started and became a depositor bank. Its credit was sustained by the government in office. Let's put it right. Secondly, the Bank of England had, till lately, the monopoly of limited liability in England. The common law of England knows nothing of any such principle. It is only possible by royal charter or statute law, and by neither of these was any real bank, I do not count absurd schemes such as Chamberlain's land bank, permitted with limited liability in England till within these few years. Indeed, a good many people thought it was right for the Bank of England, but not right for any other bank. I remember hearing the conversations of a distinguished merchant in the city of London, who well represented the idea then most current. He was declaiming against banks of limited liability, and someone asked, "Why? What do you say then to the Bank of England, where you keep your own account?" "Oh," he replied, "that is an exceptional case. And no doubt it was an exception of the greatest value to the Bank of England, because it induced many quiet and careful merchants to be directors of the bank, who certainly would not have joined any bank where all their fortunes were liable and where the liability was not limited." What does this mean? Limited liability. It means exactly. Some of you, actually, a lot of you will know what it means sort of by modern standards. And by modern standards, a limited liability company is quite standard, right? Like we have people do shell corporations for this kind of thing all the time. LLC, right? Limited liability company. The idea that directors of a company can not be held fully responsible for the misdeeds of the company itself, right? And so this means that you can run the company and not worry about being made bankrupt by a downturn in the company itself. Excuse me. Yes, I appreciate it. Give me one second. This is abused in modern times by oligarchs, organized crime, etc. Um, but it was a great innovation because it allowed more risk taking, and it was the risk taking that allowed industrialization in Britain, um, via the industrial revolution. Whatever, you know what I mean. And brought about communism. So that's why as I was typing this, I was starting to feel more and more conflicted, because on one hand, yes, I am. If I were to subscribe to any religion, it would be sort of a limited version of capitalism, not a full-fledged, Darwinian free for all, but rather a well, we'll get to that in the future. You can ask me about it, but essentially, my conflict comes from this, right? This fact. My personal conflict comes from this fact that unbridled capitalism in the UK and excessive risk taking led to the creation of, right? And communism as a form does not fit humanity, because humanity is imperfect, whereas communism assumes a sort of more perfect psyche. We should talk about this as well. Communism, the underlying assumption of communism is that each human wants to be perfect, or each human is perfect, which is not true. Right? It assumes that greed is not. Greed is. It assumes that greed is. Okay, sorry. It assumes that greed is an acquired state. Or no, it assumes that greed is an acquired state that can be shed. Whereas in reality, we see that greed is acquired and most often not removable. Let's go with that, right? But anyway, that's sort of a completely different topic that we will talk about. Yeah, actually, let me. I'll just add that to a list of questions that we already have, since I just know that you guys will ask that. Blah 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 blah. We'll talk about that the other one as well. That's it. Men will want to emulate their governments. Does man want to emulate their government? And I would actually argue yes. And even though you guys have been trying to provide counterexamples from within the American system, I would actually argue that fundamentally it's still a yes. I'll put that in there as well, even in the current American system. Okay, excellent. We're almost done this chapter, actually. I think, yeah, just page and a half left. So let's finish it, and then we'll be done for today. Thirdly, the Bank of England had the privilege of being the sole joint stock company permitted to issue banknotes in England. Private London bankers did indeed issue notes down to the middle of the last century, but no joint stock company could do so. The explanatory clause of the Act of 1742 sounds most curiously to our modern ears. Modern. And to prevent any doubt that may arise concerning the privilege or power given to the said governor and company, that is the Bank of England, of exclusive banking, and also in regard to creating any other bank or banks uh, by Parliament, or restraining other persons from banking during the continuance of the said privilege granted to the Governor of the and Company of the Bank of England, as before recited, it is hereby further enacted and declared by the authority aforesaid that it is the true intent and meaning of the said Act that no other bank shall be created, established, or allowed by Parliament, and that it shall not be lawful for any body politic or corporate whatsoever created or to be created, or for any other persons whatsoever united or to be united in covenants or partnership exceeding the number of 6 persons in that part of Great Britain called England, to borrow, owe, or take up any sum or sums of money on their bills or notes, payable on demand, or at any less time than 6 months from the borrowing thereof during the continuance of such said privilege, to the said Governor and Company, who are hereby declared to be and remain a corporation with the privilege of exclusive banking, as before recited. Oh my god. Anyway. So, to our modern ears, these words seem to mean more than they did. The term banking was then applied only to the issue of notes and the taking up of money on bills on demand. Our present system of deposit banking, in which no bill or promissory notes are issued, was not then known on a great scale, and was not called banking, but its effect was very important. It, in time, gave the Bank of England the monopoly of the note issue of the metropolis. It had at that time no branches, and so it did not compete for the country circulation. But in the metropolis, again London, where it did compete, it was completely victorious. No company but the Bank of England could issue notes, and unincorporated individuals gradually gave way and ceased to do so. Up to 1844, London private bankers might have issued notes if they pleased, but almost 100 years ago they were forced out of the field. The Bank of England has so long had practical monopoly of the circulation that it is commonly believed to always had a legal monopoly, right? So this is very, very important. 27 minutes. Single issuer of money made the Bank of England essentially the controller of how much money was allowed in the system. And so that then grew to become the issuer and insurer of last resort, and evolved into our modern central bank. So even though the BOE was only granted inflation fighting recently, I think it was quite recent actually, like 1990, before my time, but like still very much quite recently. Where were we? Practical effect of the clause went further. It was believed to make the Bank of England the only joint stock company that could receive deposits, as well as the only company that could issue notes. The gift of exclusive banking to the Bank of England was read in its most natural modern sense. It was thought to prohibit any other banking company from carrying on our present banking. After joint stock banking was permitted in the country, people began to inquire why it should not exist in the metropolis too. And then it was seen that the words I have quoted only forbid the issue of negotiable instruments, and not the receiving of money when no such instrument is given. Upon this construction, the London and Westminster Bank and all our older joint stock banks were founded. But till they began, the Bank of England had among companies not only the exclusive privilege of note issue, but that of deposit banking too. It was in every sense the only banking company in London. And that was really helpful, right? Let's remember, because they were trying to fight a revolution. They were trying to continue their own revolution. And by the richest city depositing all of their money in the Bank of England, that money could then be put to use by the government. With so many advantages over all competitors, it is quite natural that the Bank of England should have far outstripped them all. Inevitably, it became the bank in London. All the other bankers grouped themselves round it and lodged their reserves with it. Thus, Our one reserve system of banking was not deliberately founded upon definite reasons. It was the gradual consequence of many singular events and an accumulation of legal privileges on a single bank, which has now been altered and which no one would now defend. Okay, we are. Oh my god, done. For a while, this allowed for a sole depositor within London, the richest city, and that would have been helpful in funding government, right? Anyway, yeah, so I don't know, that seemed completely reasonable. Do we have any questions? Oh, yeah, of course we do. What about the Fed? Well, the Fed is... The founding of the Fed is something completely different that we will talk about in sort of no, we'll talk about it in a different day. We'll talk about the founding of the Fed in a different day because it's too much. Yeah. What time are we at? 31. We'll talk about the founding of the Fed a different day. Any other questions besides the more inane ones? Is 8%? 8%? Well, I mean, okay, today 8% is not a lot compared to what we're actually living under at this particular moment, right? At this particular moment, the Bank of England is sitting at, I can't remember. Let me just look it up real quick, because I am actually mildly interested in what the Bank of England sees as house ban in London, excellent. Beverage Tesla, productivity, Jack Dorsey. I don't even talk about Jack Dorsey. Oh. Like our tech founders have, as they become older, they become more sanctimonious, and that's not what you're supposed to do. Hold on, I'll put it up there. 32. Jack. Tech executives become more sanctimonious as we get older, but no, let's not do that. Okay, guys. Like, these guys are going to grow old, and they're not going to leave space for the next generation, and I absolutely hate that. These boys are growing old while not leaving space for the next generation, and I hate that so much, right? Like these Jack, let's say Mark, let's Elon, Peter, who else are we talking about? Let's talk about Sergey. Actually, let's not talk about Sergey. Sergey is fine ish. Who else should I Larry. Well, I mean, Larry's a little bit older, but the point remains. They become part of the problem. They were fighting against when they were young, right? And that's not cool. That's not cool. See, that's why I changed jobs. Actually, I'm of the opinion. Actually, we'll talk about this in the future. Let's see. I'll put it under the philosophy questions. You guys can choose to ask it. People need to change jobs every 20 years. Oh, it's actually time for us to go, isn't it? Yeah. Let me just look at the Bank of England's projections real quick, because I want to. Oh, come on. Peak at 13.3%. Okay, so yeah, like 8% compared to 13.3. Obviously, it's not that much, right? but for essentially 20 years before 2022, even before 2020, let's say, in the 20 years after the .com bubble. Even if we include the Great Recession in 2008, which technically was also before my time, inflation was never a thing, right? In fact, Haruhiko Kuroda was the governor of the Bank of Japan, has been fighting inflation basically in his entire lifetime, and the late Abe Shinzo, Prime Minister of Japan, also like his 3 arrows, 2 of which completely misfired. But that's a completely different point. In inflation, like Japan was at the forefront of managing this deflation, and the rest of the world caught on with that, and now so for 20 years, even actually, you know what? Even the 90s wasn't that big in inflation, right? Inflation historical. Let me just take a look real quick. Inflation in the United States is historical rates. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Will you give me? Yes, excellent. What is this? That is 2012. No, I don't want. Oh no, I want 90. Let's go from 1990. Excuse me. Hello. There we go. Okay, so 1990 to 19. Okay, so let's say 1993 or 94 when 96 when it dropped down below 3%. Or no, let's see, what is that? 94 when it hit 3% and then it just never peaked above 3% again. It, like that's what? That's a good 26 years of quite low inflation, right? And that's basically a generation's worth, right? Only old people now remember the days of actual high inflation in the 70s and 80s, and so yeah, it is very, very different. Yeah, I see. Oh, I see Greens. Was it Greenspan? It was Greenspan, right? 87 to no pre Greenspan. It's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. Volker. Paul Volcker. Yeah. 79 to 87. My boy Paul, right? Like that. He really brought that down. Anyway, no. We're done for today. We need to go. Yes, thank you very much. I mean, so you guys know me. I have enough opinions about this to last a lifetime. 38. I have enough opinions on this to last a lifetime. Yes. We're done for today. Thank you for watching. In conclusion, please. No, they'll be all posted. Don't worry. What was I saying? Right. Please don't do Firefox. Please, no. Thank you. No. Don't harp on that. Thank you very much. Please do Firefox. Okay. Don't do Chrome. Please download Firefox. Don't do Chrome, and I shall see all of you tomorrow. Yes. Oh no, I won't see you tomorrow. I'll talk to you on Discord tomorrow, but tomorrow our broadcast is off. Remember that. Okay, good. Bye now. Wink left. You see that left? Good. Bye.